how do I actually manage the money that comes in? This is a tough one because we don't. I talked about this on a recent live. I think it was yeah, it was in regards to the last live episode, actually from a couple days ago, about growing and building an audience. You can check it again in the links or go to bringyourworth.com, bringyourworth.tv, bringyourworth.com is my website, bringyourworth.tv, and check it out. It was how on growing an audience, with the last couple lives that we had. We can do so much visioning as far as what we want, particularly when it's something we don't have. I wish I was a millionaire. I wish I was a little bit taller. I wish I was a baller, etc. We can just keep going and going and going. But then what happens when we do become a millionaire? What happens when we are a baller? What happens when we have the best-selling book? What happens is that we don't often prepare for the other side of the mountain. I've had a couple bestsellers. I've had some successes. Maybe you have too. And if you have, you recognize that when you have that success, there's a whole nother mountain to climb and or more things to manage. And if you don't strategize what you're going to do after that, then you're going to end up in trouble, and often you end up losing whatever you gained. An excellent book that talks about this, one of my favorite books, favorite books. It's called Sudden Money. This is so old. You see the dog ears. You can tell when I started taking my freelancing seriously. Shout out to Susan Bradley. Bradley? Bradley, not Bradley. I don't know who that is. Susan Bradley. Fantastic. She has like 5 new editions. No Bobby, Ricky, and Mike. Excellent book. I do not have the cover anymore. I might have lost it in Katrina, y'all. Like, that's how long ago I got this book. There's another very expensive book. I'm not gonna lie. Not gonna lie. As of this recording, it's gonna cost you about $50 for that book. But let me tell you what the book is about. I got to keep it in my hand because, man, this book is fantastic. There's a reason why I've had it for going on 2 decades. It talks about what happens when you get a financial windfall. In fact, I think the subtitle is How to Handle a Windfall, something to that effect. This talks about how we go from barely getting by or being middle class or whatever your station might be, and suddenly we're able to eat out every night. Suddenly we can buy a new car. Some of us who are really balling can buy a plane or some crazy stuff. Like, what is the psychological experience of that? As a business coach, as an author, I love the idea of not just saying I want to make $1 million, being like, no, like, what's the mindset that I need to get into when I do become a millionaire? Because chances are, I've worked with a lot of folks, chances are whatever you're aiming for, it eventually will come true. Maybe not in the form that you want it, but it eventually will come through. It might just be in a different form. But if you're persistent at it, most of us do get that thing that we want because we're laser focused on it. And then whatever your belief system happens to be. What we don't prepare for, though, is actually winning. This talks about that. And it talks about the case for athletes. It talks about lottery winners. And then might be more applicable to most of us that are connecting here on this program, what it's like to make it big as an artist. My last startup was acquired, and I went through this period of time where I wasn't sure what my identity was anymore because I was the founder of the startup. We got 250,000 users, and then suddenly it got acquired by our choice. It wasn't aggressive. We decided to sell it. But even when it's in your hands, there's still identity shift, maybe even identity crisis that happens. Not to mention, there's a beautiful term she uses in here. It's called sliding down the money chute. That basically means, say you get a phone call. I would say a DM, but that doesn't sound legitimate. But you get a phone call, you get a letter in the mail, and it's like, hey, whatever you make a year, this thing took off. I want to buy the rights to this, blah, blah, blah. Here's 10 times that. Here's 50 times that. Here you go. Where's your bank account so I can wire it to you? Think about that experience. See how it feels in your body. That's falling down the money chute. Suddenly, all these things that you found stable and that you took as who you are, suddenly those things are shifting. And I'm not a very money focused person. And even for me, when I've gotten a lot of money or my stuff got acquired or whatever, I went through all kinds of emotions. If you're a money driven person, please get this book because I'm not even money driven in that kind of way. And I went through the stuff, still going through it. Grab this book so you can understand when you get that higher profit, how to psychologically handle it. She even has 5 steps, a 5 step process to go through that her clients and other folks, I think she's a CFA, her clients and other folks have gone through to deal with that process. That's why I'm emphasizing it so much. Make sure that you're psychologically ready to get that windfall. And on that note, what to do with a financial windfall, episode 254. So glad I started numbering these. So I want to say the episode came out about a year ago. One of my favorite episodes. It's super short. It's like 6 minutes long. And it talks about some of the stuff that Susan talks about in the book, as well as me working with clients and other folks who are going through these major transitions. And what happens when you actually, quote unquote, win. People don't talk about that. They talk about getting up from failure and all those things, which is cool. I've written books about it. That's fantastic. But we don't talk about what happens when we actually win. And as Elizabeth Gilbert talked about in her, she had a beautiful TED talk about 10 years ago, talking about success and failure. And to us, psychologically, it feels the same way. All we know is that the way that we're used to doing things, the way that we feel stable, doesn't exist anymore. That's the main thing that we know. Other than that, the rest of it's just little details. So how do you psychologically prime yourself to make more money? In this case, in 2024, a lot of it begins with this episode. So be sure and throw any quotes. If you want to throw a quote in there, you can, or comments. How are you managing the money that comes in? And how do you plan on managing it in the future when you get your more profitable upcoming next year?